Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Books with Tanisha. I'm Tanisha. I'm really excited to have another really great reader, educator friend join us today as we talk about three books that she's personally really excited about sharing, and also the idea of what it means like to have identity affirming stories. So I am welcoming Rachel Trudelle this morning. I just want to say hello, and we know that life is like happening around us. So
Yes, of course. Like just as you were introducing, someone comes into the room, like, get out. Thank
Yes,
you.
I remember like when I first started recording this during like Facebook Live, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen around me when I'm doing this, but I mean,
Yes.
life is real. So we
Thank
appreciate the fact you're taking time to do this on a weekend morning with your family around you. So excited to start hearing these books. Rachel, thanks and welcome to Talking Books with Tanisha.
thank you.
Yeah. So tell us about the books that we have today. What are we going to be talking about?
Yeah, so I just chose three children's books, picture books, and really I love children's literature so much because I mean so many different reasons, but one thing is that there are pictures, like amazing pictures, and the illustrations I feel like are a whole other piece of enjoying children's literature as you get to experience both the words and then also the art that's a part of it. And so I chose these kind of for both of those reasons. I really think the stories are important, but then I also feel like it's an experience to look through the illustrations and the art in both of these. And so that's one reason. Um, I also just think the experience of reading children's books, I mean, you can gain so much. You can gain the stories, but you can also have the experience of reading often with kids. And in that in itself is also so amazing because it's a relational thing. So I was really grateful when you said I could share these because I think they're all amazing for different reasons. So should I just start with the first one?
Let's go in. Yeah, let's get
Okay,
started.
so the first one is called The Day You Begin. You have it behind you by Jacqueline Woodson. And the book itself kind of reads almost like a poem. It's really lyrical. The inspiration comes from a poem in one of her books called Brown Girl Dreaming. And so just to summarize, it's about kind of the experience of a few different kids on their first day of school. And really how when they walk into the room, it says there will be days when it feels like there's no one like you. And so the experience of just walking into a space where you just immediately feel different is right off the bat kind of the topic that is explored. And so this character at the front, we don't learn her name till later, but she experiences kind of just that feeling of difference based off of how she looks, that she looks around and she doesn't see anyone who looks like her. But then right away, we also hear about a little boy named Rigoberto who feels like there's nobody there who can understand him. And then there's a few other characters. There's a moment where a girl, I just happened to turn to it, is eating her lunch. And there's this microaggression that happens where someone says, "What's that? What are you eating?" And so she immediately feels different. And out at recess, there's a boy with a book and everyone's playing these games and sports and he feels on the outside. So the way that the author speaks as she's writing, she says you to us, the reader. We kind of feel like that you is the girl, but also it's all of us. And so I feel like we can all connect in some way to being in a space where we just don't feel like others are like us. And for whatever reason, I mean, I often don't feel that way based off how I look as a white woman when I'm in a space, when I look around, but I know that like we don't know everybody's story in that room, right? And so there's things that we just assume about people and we're so quick to kind of other people. And so all of that to say at the end, the part to me that is just amazing, it's again like a poem, is she says, there will be times when you walk into a room and no one there is quite like you until the day you begin to share your stories. And so then this is where we hear her name. She says, "My name is Angelina. I spent my whole summer with my little sister. You tell the class your voice stronger than it was a minute ago, reading books and telling stories, even though we were right on our block. It was like we got to go everywhere." And so it's just a really cool moment where in the book, then there's this connection. The Rigoberto says, my sister's name is Angelina. And
Aw.
so they connect, and then there's a chance for this kind of budding friendship. So
Yeah.
it's a really cool story that I feel like all kids can connect to, whether they are experiencing that themselves, or they are just kind of getting into that, feeling of empathy for how others might be experiencing school. So anyway, that was a kind of hopefully not too long of a summary, but just really
No,
story.
that was really beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What about separate is never equal?
Yeah, so I'll just talk about this one quickly. This one is really nonfiction. It's about Sylvia Mendez and her family in the 1940s. They moved to Westminster, California, and she's super excited to enroll in her neighborhood school, and they are told right away that she and her brothers have to go to what's called the Mexican school. And so she experiences kind of just a place that is not taken care of. The teachers don't seem to care about how the kids are doing. And so her family really fights for the end of segregated schooling in California. So they file a lawsuit. The book even walks through kind of the courtroom, what's happening there. And they were never able to get an answer of why do our kids have to go to this other school? And so finally the racism comes out in the courtroom, and it's really powerful. Like, this is a children's book, but kids are hearing about this really overt racism and segregation. And they won the fight in their lawsuit to have desegregated schools in California. And that was 7 years before Brown versus Board of Education. So I just think it's an important story because it's an example of how we often don't hear stories like this in the history books, right? And we don't see how different people have fought for the rights and for big moments in history. And so I think it's important as a teacher or as a parent for us to share those kind of windows into history we don't often get.
Yeah.
So that's that one.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
That sounds powerful, actually.
Yeah, and just really quick, a note about the art. So it's Duncan Tonatillo is from Mexico, and he uses kind of this style of art that's really signature for him, and it's called Mixtec. It's very much kind of a folk and cultural type of art. So I really think it's cool to see that as well reflected in the book. So again,
thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, the last book. What's that one about?
Last one, yes. So Milo Imagines the World is about a little boy who hops on the subway with his sister, and we don't know at the beginning where they're going. We just know that he is very much an imaginative kid who likes to draw, and he's always drawing pictures. He's looking at people around him and kind of imagining what's going on in their lives. He tries to show his sister, and she's kind of absorbed in her phone. So it kind of feels like, a real life situation. And then the kids, like his older sister and himself, well, I guess I should say really quick, he's drawing these pictures of people on the subway that he sees and imagining what their life is like. And it's very much assuming that they have these lives that are really elaborate and, full of wealth. And he imagines this one little boy who's dressed very nicely heading off to a castle after he gets off the subway.
Yeah.
And so anyway, at the very end, towards the end, he arrives at his stop, and it's actually at a prison. And he and that same little boy who imagined was going to a castle are in line to go visit somebody at this prison. And so he reunites with his mom, who is there. And it's just kind of a moment where he realizes all the stories he had about people, maybe those aren't the stories of their lives. And he imagines kind of it for each one of the different people he draws pictures of, like something different. So it kind of connects in many ways to the first book, The Day You Began, and just understanding people's stories. And I think it's a powerful one because, there's really great like representation and helps you think through like possibly what stereotypes do for our stories we tell about people. Yeah. So at the end, like this is just an example. He sees a bride on the subway and he thinks, well, maybe I'm trying to reimagine all the pictures he made. Maybe we could have done it like this instead. So he imagined that one man had gone home by himself, or maybe he actually went home to a family. And maybe that bride was not going off to a wedding that he imagined, but maybe it was just these two brides together. And then the break dancers who came on, who he imagined were being followed in a store, maybe this is their home. Like, it's just a really powerful way for kids to think through their assumptions.
Yeah.
And I think normalizes people in prison are people too, like his mother. So just a lot of themes that kids can handle. And I think the pictures again really help bring it to life. I love Christian Robinson's art. He does a lot of really kind of, I'm sure you've seen Last Stop on Market Street is one that he's drawn pictures for. So yeah, it's pretty good.
These books seem amazing. I was telling you before we started that I've only read Separate is Never Equal, and now I want to go and read the other two because the stories just seem really powerful. And I do believe, I think I read something that, if you want to know the truth, like find a picture book. Like the picture books are the truth tellers, and they can tell the story that sometimes adults can't tell. And so I want to thank you for introducing like these three specifically, but I know you probably have like a whole list that, you could probably, kind of ramble off. One thing I want to make sure I don't forget to say is you are definitely like an avid reader and a person like I think is definitely an advocate for literacy in general, but you also like specialize in literacy. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about, I'm going to connect the next two questions together because I don't want to lose that piece of like who you are in this conversation. So I love to talk about the importance of literacy as it connects to identity affirming stories. Like, kind of tell me your story around that.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, as a reading teacher and also someone who kind of coaches other teachers on teaching reading, I think a lot about our role as educators, and helping kids become literate first and learning to read is one of my big passions. I feel like it's a right to have that foundational ability to read, lift the words off the page. So I think of that and I hold that really high in its importance in teaching. But I also feel like at the same time, we've got this like parallel path of let's learn to read, and then let's also build knowledge about ourselves and the world. So there's these two paths, and a lot of times in the lower grades, we think about it's all about learning to read, but really they're parallel and happening at the same time in education, I think is what we should be focused on. And kind of flip side is a lot of times we think in the older grades, it's all about just the texts, right? But it's also about like our skills and can we access these books?
Right.
So it's both parallel at the same time, I guess is my point. But then if we think about that kind of road around text and what we are choosing, I feel like it just has to be so intentional because if we are trying to build knowledge about kids, build knowledge for kids and with kids, really, then we're looking at books that have those windows, mirrors, sliding doors, and how really, if we're doing that, we're thinking about kind of like the humanity of our students.
Yeah.
So I think it's so easy when kids are struggling in learning to read to just think about the deficits of like, oh, they can't do it yet. They can't do it yet. But if we're focused on what texts we also are putting in front of them, we're thinking about who are they? What are their interests? Like they aren't just the statistics of like this percent of kids can't do it. It's who are the kids in my class and how do I build that knowledge with them? So I think that means we have to look at their identities, their multiple identities, and thinking about building knowledge with them. Like this book, Separate is Never Equal. I feel like teachers would be learning alongside their kids about history. And then having conversations about, identity and stories and strengths. That's really what happens when you focus intentionally on what texts are in front of kids. So I guess those are just kind of my thoughts about why we need both.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad I asked that question because I really that's the piece I love hearing when you talk about like literacy and like the impacts and, like I think I've always really appreciated that about you and the things that you have introduced to me personally around about being thoughtful around the connecting those parallel pieces I think are really important. And I do believe that when we talk about the books that you're choosing, those are books that people would definitely consider, wait a second, do I want people to have access, like little ones to have access to that right now? Which is where that whole, idea and that kind of wave of like banned books is coming from, right? Like who's ready for the stories, who's ready for the truth? What's your reaction to that?
Yeah. So I was, when I was thinking about sharing these books, I was curious to find out more about why these books themselves would be banned. Because it really is kind of like, really, like it does it in many ways. And then as I was doing this kind of reading and I read some articles and found a few sites that helped really explain what it was. I mean, there's a few I think two of these books were in like a pack of books that some districts kind of immediately dismissed. It was even going to be donated for free to them, but they were saying, no, these books are not appropriate. And really just kind of lumping them all into a category of this would cause our students to be divisive on these topics. And then the separate is never equal was about, yeah, maybe kids aren't ready for this history. But I read an interview with the author, and he was saying, racism is the villain in this story, and kids get that. Like they understand that's the villain. It's not that they're going to take on these mindsets that are being, that some of these characters had, not characters, real life people had. So I think kids can understand that. When I'm reading with my own children, they get that. And it's a really powerful conversation we're able to have after reading these stories. So I guess I disagree that they're not ready. I think that the authors are completely thinking about development around kids and their interests, and what they can experience is totally appropriate.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a really great perspective to have people hold on to. Okay, Rachel, what are you currently reading?
Oh yeah. So I thought about two things to share. One was another picture book, just because it's really new, and I know you and I both love Jason Reynolds. Have you seen his new picture book?
No, I have not.
Yeah, it just came out. I had heard him like a few years ago say, I really want to write a picture book. And I was like, I'm going to buy that the minute it comes out, because again, it's like poetry, reading his work. And then the art is amazing. Even the art itself has like, I should research what this is called, but when it actually is in a shape, that's kind of like a part of it is the poetry and the art combined. Anyway, so I just read that. I just got it and just read it with my kids the other day, and it's pretty cool. It's about Langston Hughes, who was a writer and inspired people like Maya Angelou. So that, but then also for myself, I don't usually read a lot of poetry, but it's funny. This is all kind of happening right now with me. This is a book I've recently started reading called You Better Be Lightning. It's by Andrea Gibson. They have kind of chronic health issues, but they also just write kind of like words that, get you in your gut. Like you read it and you're like, whoa, that was good. So one of the poems, it's super short, but it's called Wellness Check. And it's like, I hope I don't ruin it, but they say, like, am I living my life? This is just a summary really of more thinking about who am I loving or who is not loving me. And it's just a check that I can give myself every so often. Like, am I really focused more on that person disagreeing with me, or not, like I'm not feeling good enough for them? Or am I more focused on who am I loving? And so kind of just the way they use those words hit me so hard that I had to buy their whole book. And there's a lot of great stuff about gender. There's a lot of in there about like emotions and fear. And so anyway, I feel like it's a really powerful way to think about those topics. And it's not super heavy. It has some light moments and funny humor too. So yeah, check it out.
I mean, now I have to find it. Like Jason Reynolds picture book, because I did not know. So thank you for introducing that to me.
Welcome.
I have to go find it. This has been a really great conversation. Like you have brought a lot of, I think, some really intentional thoughts for people to consider. I hope people who are watching this or kind of rethinking, or maybe, having a reaffirmation of like, like actually these can be really great stories to put not just in the hands of like my children, but also the hands of the adults in my life. Like the idea of like learning along with, I think is really powerful. Also the piece around the content and also their literacy skills at the same time, kind of no matter what grade level we're at or what age we're at. And mostly important is like hearing your like enthusiasm and passion around the stories. Like I loved listening to that and kind of watching that.
Thank you.
Any last words you want to share with our audience, our viewers?
Gosh, I guess I've enjoyed just tuning into these, because I do think it is an amazing opportunity to hear not just like a review of a book, but really how people, you've had authors even on your channel. And so, gosh, it's not really a last thought, but I'm just feeling so honored to be a part of it. So just encouraging people to keep watching, because I think there is so much power in books, and the fact that you're highlighting these books and bringing these topics to light, it's just so important. So just to say thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. You heard her. Like and subscribe and share this, everybody. Make sure everyone has a chance to see it. All right. Thanks so much for being here today, Rachel. Thank you, everyone, for coming in and watching this episode. Please do share it with the people in your lives, especially those who have little ones around them who might be looking for stories. I mean, they kind of are ready for the stories sometimes before the adults are. So let's learn with them. Let's read with them. Keep reading, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.